There's a place in the universe unlike any other, a modest blue and white planet circling a very ordinary star. It's the only place we know of with oceans of liquid water and an atmosphere rich in oxygen. It's the only place we know of which has created the magical essence called life. Of 20 million life forms, a species called man has grown so powerful that it threatens the creativity of the planet. That species is now searching for a new understanding of its relationship with Earth, its one and only home place.
What do you suppose a ground squirrel sees as she looks out across this mountain meadow? I wonder if she sees the incredible beauty of her home place. Or does she only see bits and pieces? A world of fragments, some of which she can eat, others useful for making her burrow nest, still others which might harm her. If I move, I may become important to her as a potentially dangerous intruder. But standing quietly, I fade into insignificance, not a threat, not edible. I'm an unimportant part of her environment. But right now, she is an important part of my environment as I admire the sheen of her fur, the sparkle of her bright eyes, and the antics of her family. Just like her, I perceive my environment as being the important things which surround me. She sees food, plants, and cover. I see her and a wonderfully colorful meadow. We look at the same landscape, but we would not list the same things as being the important parts of our environment. If I change my point of view by climbing to a ridge high above the meadow, I have a different understanding of the meadow environment. I can see some of the other animals which share this mountainside, the high snowbanks and icy ponds which trickle water through the meadow. I can see how ridges and valleys direct the flow of wind and the formation of clouds. From here I see that the meadow is connected to the rest of the mountain. The ground squirrel is not likely to find her way up here. She will never have the benefit of this broader view. As long as we see our surroundings from close up, from inside, we only half understand them. Until recently, that's the only way we've been able to look at the world. This insider's view gives a very fragmented image of environment. To fill out the picture, we need to look at the world from the outside, seeing it as a whole. This brings a new appreciation of its marvelous beauty. There are different ways of looking at the planet Earth and our relationship to it. Things look different if you are on the inside looking out, like the ground squirrel on a meadow, or if you are on the outside looking in from a distant vantage point. We need to explore human ecology from different viewpoints and ask a lot of searching questions if we want a better understanding of our place on Earth. The first question is, what on Earth is environment? Here we are in the Cypress Hills of southwestern Saskatchewan. Most people would call this a quality environment with an abundance of natural beauty, an appealing landscape. We can look around and make a list of the things which make up the Cypress Hills environment. To begin, there's the air, the earth, the water, And there are plants and animals which wander about near the boundaries where air meets water and soil. Nearby, there's an old log bunkhouse that ranchers built many decades ago. There's a car going past on a gravel road. We can hear it, see it, and taste the dust that it's raising. This is how we usually define environment, by listing the things around us which impact on our senses. Some seem very important, especially structures and machines that humans have made. Some seem unimportant until we change their form. Things which we find a use for are called natural resources or raw materials. We think of them as stacks of God-given goodies, put here just for our benefit. When there is no obvious use, we often ask, what's it good for? Everything is evaluated through human eyes. It's been our practice to give brief thanks for our water, forests, and rich soils, for what we presume to call our heritage, and then pitch in to change these free gifts of nature into human wealth. We've had so little understanding of our surroundings that we couldn't see the dangers of this self-centered approach. This stream in British Columbia is home to salmon for a few weeks each year. You can see them in the shallows as they travel to spawning beds. Suppose that one of the salmon was also trying to define his environment. The salmon's home place is very different from ours. It's a world of swirling bubbles, constant noise, buffeting currents, rounded stones, and gravelly bars. Clouds and trees and winds are not likely important to him. Does the salmon even understand what water is? Perhaps in leaping a waterfall, he has had a glimpse of the river valley. But considering his limited knowledge and experience, would we want to trust a fish to make decisions about the valley environment? Unaware that trees control stream flow, he might see no problem with clear-cut logging of the watershed. Thinking that dry land is useless, a salmon might see no harm in mining poisonous minerals from deep in the earth, or using a hillside as a garbage dump. It would not occur to a fish that treelessness and mine wastes and garbage on dry land could make his watery environment unlivable. So far as we know, the salmon lacks the perception that he and his stream are part of a larger system, a watershed. We've been a lot like the salmon, immersed in surroundings which we do not really understand. It's only been very recently that we've got outside, and what a change of perspective that has brought. The view from space shows that environment is much more than disconnected things surrounding us. Our home place is a blue and white sphere, blue from the sea, white from the cloudy atmosphere. Earth is one single entity, everything united by billions of years of co-development and by ecological relationships. Standing on Earth's surface, we seem to see distinct air, water, sediments, plants, and animals. From space, we see them as interrelated parts. From the inside, reality seems to be separate bits and pieces. From outside, we see Earth as one whole system, the ecosphere. This global view of our home place helps us understand the landscapes and waterscapes where we spend our lives. The alpine meadow with its air, earth, flowers, and ground squirrels is a part of it. So is the pinewood fescue grassland of the Cypress Hills, and the stream with its salmon. So are the ocean depths, and the cities which we have constructed. We refer to these pieces of the ecosphere as ecosystems. The ecosystems envelop us. We are within them. We're parts of them. Their health affects our health. If they deteriorate, so do we. So the idea of ecosystems is very different from the idea of environments, which seem separate from us. Ecosystem is a more useful concept as we try to understand our role as earthlings. Ecosystems represent one very important level of organization of matter. We recognize many levels of organization in nature, from atoms to molecules, from molecules to compounds like rock and protoplasm. At higher levels of organization, water and minerals and cells are combined within bodies, a cattail or a duckling. At the next level, organisms along with their surrounding air, water, soil, and sediments constitute ecosystems. All of Earth's ecosystems together comprise the ecosphere. There are even higher levels of organization, for Earth is part of a solar system. This solar system is part of the galaxy and ultimately part of the infinite universe. We have learned to think of reality as being built from the bottom up, from atoms to the universe, but this can be a misleading approach. We didn't learn about the Earth by adding up everything we know about continents and oceans. We started with an idea of Earth. We didn't learn about the solar system by adding up what we knew about Earth and Moon. We first had to study the movements of sun and planets. The realization that these movements were connected brought about a sudden change in scientific thought. We finally had a concept of solar system, which made sense of our observations. Before we can study and understand any of the levels, we must first have a concept, a mental image of what that level is like. This is why it took so long to recognize the significance of the ecosphere and its ecosystems. We couldn't get hold of them by mentally adding up all of the things around us. They only added up to environment. We needed an outside-the-system viewpoint to see that everything on Earth is part of one large, unified system. Before Earth was seen from space, we didn't think of it as a single being. We usually divided its surface into gaseous atmosphere, liquid hydrosphere, solid lithosphere, and organic biosphere. We developed specialized sciences to study each of the divisions. But now we see that we've made an artificial separation of things which are all interrelated. The ecosphere is like a layer cake, with organisms the nuts and raisins in the mix. The way to study it is to mentally slice it into three-dimensional chunks with vertical walls, each with air above, earth and water below, with organisms among the layers, living off solar energy. These chunks of the ecosphere are ecosystems. We have named them lakes and forests, deserts and meadows. Each is like a giant aquarium or terrarium, except that every ecosystem is more clearly connected to its neighbors. Here are three beautiful slices of ecosphere, three interconnected ecosystems. We're looking at the south shore of Lake Athabasca in northwestern Saskatchewan. One of the ecosystems is a magnificent sand dune complex. Another system is the William River and its valley, which cuts across the sand dunes. The third system is Lake Athabasca itself. The dunes began to form over 8,000 years ago as the last ice age ended, leaving great expanses of sand exposed to erosion by the wind. The dunes have been restlessly moving ever since, interacting with groundwater, with surrounding forests and lakes, and with a sparse vegetation of hardy plants, to form the intricate patterns visible from the air. The unique appearance of the William River results from its ecological relationships with the surrounding sands. About half of the water in the river comes from the dunes, which gather rain and snowmelt as groundwater. The river is also choked by wind-blown sand. If we want to understand exactly how the river system works, we must look inside the system and study its physiology. We find that the flowing water carries a load of suspended sand grains, which are picked up where the current is fast and dropped where it slows. The result is an ever-changing pattern of sandbars and channels. Deep spots appear dark because of the greater depth of tea-colored water and an accumulation of organic matter. In these places, northern pike lie in wait for smaller fish. Bit by bit, the river steadily transports its burden of sand and organic matter northward to Lake Athabasca. The sand is deposited where the river current is slowed by lake water. It forms the fan-shaped delta, which marks the end of the William River ecosystem. Now, forces within the Lake Athabasca ecosystem take over. Cross currents and waves move the sand along the shore, creating broad strands or bars. In periods of unusually low water, these nearshore deposits are exposed to wind that blows them inland again as part of the traveling dunes. Dunes, river, and lake are all connected ecologically. At the same time, each has distinct inner workings. Each has its own unique physiology. These three ecosystems are all different sizes and shapes. An ecosystem can be whatever segment of Earth we choose to study. Going up the scale, each is part of a larger system up to the level of ecosphere. Going down the size scale, each ecosystem can be subdivided into smaller systems. When we relate a system such as this leaf to the system that surrounds it, the forest system, we're practicing ecology. And when we relate the parts of a system to the system itself, we're practicing physiology. It's a matter of looking outside or of looking inside. When we have the benefit of both viewpoints, it becomes clear that there is a continuity of relationships throughout the ecosphere. And this has important implications for the idea of life itself. In our usual way of looking at the world, there are important things like us, living organisms, surrounded by non-living air, soil, water, which seem to be less important. We appeared to inhabit a world that is dead. We perceived our surroundings much like the larva of this longhorn beetle. The larva hatches beneath the bark of a tree and spends as many as 4 years chewing its way through the wood of the trunk. In that time, it gets to know its cellulose environment very well. An intelligent grub would probably think that the center of the trunk is composed of dead cells filled with rosin and hard to chew. Surrounding this, he finds a thick layer of light, moist sapwood, which is edible but still shows no sign of life. The only place where the grub finds cells which he considers to be truly alive is in a thin layer just beneath the bark. The cells are respiring and dividing and expanding. There's no question that they are alive, but they still contain dead things, starch grains, cell walls. On balance, the grub's environment seems mostly dead, providing just barely enough resources to allow the insect to survive. After 3 or 4 years, the insect emerges as an adult, exiting the tree trunk into an entirely new world, one that it has never known before. What does it make of the tree now? Green leaves and growing branches, photosynthesis, respiration. Suddenly that mass of mostly dead woody cells is seen to be alive. How can this be? Well, the beetle grub spent most of its life on the inside, in the dark about the true nature of its environment. What a difference the view from outside makes in the perception of what is dead and what is alive. People are just beginning to distinguish between the world seen from the inside and the world seen from the outside. Until satellites gave us a view from beyond our immediate environment, we saw our surroundings through short-sighted eyes. From the inside, some things seemed more alive than others. We called them organisms. But most things seemed dead. We called them inorganic, abiotic, inanimate, or just environment. But from space, the place we thought we knew so well is revealed as being one unified system. Organic and inorganic pieces all merged together into one living entity, the ecosphere. This Earth possesses life-giving qualities which are almost unbelievable. The atmosphere is 1/5 oxygen. Oxygen is essential for organisms like ourselves, but it's a highly reactive gas which by any reasonable guess should have been locked up by chemical reaction with sediments long ago. Yet the ecosphere maintains the constant supply of oxygen needed for organisms to survive. Other gases like water vapor and carbon dioxide and ozone insulate the Earth. Their proportions have gradually adjusted so that Earth's surface temperature has been almost constant for about 200 million years, even though the sun is now much hotter than it used to be. And consider the oceans, which cover 70% of the Earth's surface, and the abundance of life-giving water they represent. Liquid water is rare elsewhere in the solar system, but on Earth it is abundant, an essential component of ecosystems and organisms. This ecosphere has properties which could not exist in a purely chemical and physical system. And within this improbable framework, we find an unbelievable variety of organisms, fixing energy from sun and earth, growing, reproducing, and evolving. So far as we know, this occurs nowhere else in the universe. Until recently, we assumed that life was a property of organisms, even though we knew that without environmental support, the organisms would die. Now, logic tells us that life, whatever that magical essence may be, is a property of the ecosphere and not of its separate parts. Life exists as much in the improbable air, rocks, and water as it does in organisms. All are components of one living ecosphere. From inside the world, it has seemed sensible to say organisms have environments. But from the outside, we realize that we've got it backwards. In reality, living ecosystems have organisms. This shift in perspective reveals a greater truth. If we accept that life is a property of the ecosphere and its ecosystems, we gain a new insight into problems of earth care and conservation. Ducks and grebes were born of marsh ecosystems and will perish without wetlands. Whales are one with their oceans. Pronghorns and grasslands live or die together. When we wish to protect living things, we must protect ecosystems. Endangered species need our care first. Without them, endangered species cannot survive. Perceiving life as a property of ecosystems also sheds a different light on our ideas about competition and predation in nature. A flock of pelicans works together to capture a fish, which benefits the entire colony even if only one bird digests it. The fish have reproductive strategies which make a surplus available for pelicans to eat. The dynamic balance within the ecosystem involves taking and giving. Nature looks very different to us depending on whether we take the inside view or the outside view. Both are necessary, for neither alone gives the understanding we seek. Our basic problem is that we have built our cultures, religions, and beliefs on a self-centered insider's view. Our view has been as limited in its perspective as the salmon in its stream, the wood borer in its tree trunk, or the ground squirrel in its isolated meadow. On this faulty foundation, we've built a civilization that values the wrong things and ignores the essentials. Now we know where we are. Now we know the importance of what surrounds us. Now we know that the ecosphere is the source of creativity, of evolution, of life itself. This understanding opens the way to solving the so-called environmental problems, which we have created. They're not problems of the earth, they're problems of people. When it comes to basics, I'm not part of the ground squirrel's environment, nor is she part of mine. We're both small cooperative parts of one magnificent living earth. We share the same home place. We must tend it compliantly together.